Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Yes, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. It's a beautiful, hot, sunny day here in Vanuatu.
I was just about to say, I think you win the prize thus far. Or maybe the guy in Costa Rica, I don't know. But I think you win the prize for certainly the furthest away from me and the most remote and probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. Welcome from Vanuatu.
Right. Okay. Yes. No. We've it's been great recently. Poor old Solomon Islands have been having lots of rain.
Yes,
Talking to somebody there recently, they said it hadn't stopped for 3 weeks. But we've got a nice sunny day.
Unbelievable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so for those of our listeners, people joining our crucial COVID conversations pretty much all over the world, actually, as we've just mentioned, cool. We are in 2 separate locations, quite remote, spotty possibility of spotty internet. If it does happen, we'll pause. We'll just come right back into it. So just bear with us and enjoy this this beautiful virtual world for us to be able to talk to each other thousands of miles from each other. So, Chris,
absolutely.
Yeah. So let me start by just basically doing a little intro about you and I. We've met many years ago, actually, probably within the first couple of years. I moved to the Solomons, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, probably even. And
yeah, I've been going backwards and forwards for about 10. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So there you go. And we've just had this beautiful instant connection. Chris he runs and his partner, they run a wonderful consulting business in the South Pacific, doing amazing stuff for lots of people and lots of businesses. So I'm quite excited to talk to Chris today and hear his take on the COVID year and and what's happening in 2021. So we'll unpack those questions as we go along. But Chris has been a wonderful friend. There's been stages that I really pushed on his button to help me and be a mentor and be a coach. And Chris has been wonderfully inspirational, and he's done such amazing stuff for the Solomons and Vanuatu as well. So he'll talk more about that. Chris, will you allow me to do a little blurb on a bio? I mean, is that okay if I go ahead?
Yes.
And feel free to jump in with anything that I missed. Chris, from my side, does an amazing business, doing business consulting, leadership development, doing a lot of stuff with youth and females, change management, strategic planning, lots of training, wonderful initiatives as well. So Chris is a business coach and mentor, as well as a development consultant, trainer, and facilitator, working in the Pacific Islands with a wide range of organizations and individuals, small, medium-sized enterprises, larger businesses. You do, Chris, business support for organizations, also state-owned enterprises. So you do both private and public consultation and work, entrepreneurs, governments, agencies, NGOs, and other development organizations, the whole shebang. You're a fabulous, inspiring individual. I am so in awe by your positivity, energy, and motivation. We both know how challenging it can be working in the South Pacific, and you are a force to be reckoned with. So I am so thankful and so happy that you are joining my crucial COVID conversations today.
What a wonderful welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did I miss anything? Anything you want to add? I mean, some of the stuff we'll talk about as we go through the questions.
How could I possibly follow that, Belinda? No, that's fine.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. So Chris has also done some cool stuff with me. For those of you that do not know, my consulting part, I put my consulting had it back on during this crisis to diversify my businesses in the South Pacific. And Chris has shared some amazing stories, what he has done in terms of working with his clients during the COVID-19 crisis. He's joined me for some webinars, etc. So really cool stuff. If you're interested, let me know and I can share some of that information and you can see a bit more about that as well. But, you know, I almost want to start our session, Chris, by talking about, you know, how even the best of us and even the ones that we feel that we have lots of experience, we all need a mentor and we all need a coach and we all need somebody to have our back and bounce ideas off and share resources. And you've been that for me in the Pacific, and I want to thank you for that. And it just highlights that we are all in this together, and it's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to not know the answers, whether it's business-wise or personal, and it is okay to reach out and ask for help. And this is what this crucial conversations, COVID conversations, is all about. You know, sharing tips, resources, experiences to help people deal with not just the aftermath of 2020, but also what 2021 is going to bring.
Absolutely.
Okay, so shall we just get started? So Chris, tell me, you know, who are you and what gets you out of bed every day?
That's the big question.
Exactly.
I mean, I've been all through my life, I've been in a real privileged position of being able to work with people I like working with in a whole range of situations. The last 10 years all been in the Pacific. As you know, I mean, people in the South Pacific are really cool, really friendly. They love stories. There's obviously a lot of struggle, but people are very open, you know? And when I started about 10 years ago working in the Pacific with the mentoring program, and just real privilege, really, of just sitting there listening to people's stories and people just opening up, talking. I mean, it's quite, what's the word? You know, people are asking you. I'd only been in the Pacific 5 minutes and people are asking for my opinion. And yet they live there all their lives, really. Yeah. But it's been a really, I mean, the 10-year journey in the Pacific has been fantastic. You know, 10 countries. The last 4 or 5 years focused around Melanesia. So Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomons, particularly, a little bit in Papua New Guinea. But just really understanding the cultures, doing a lot of reading. Just, I mean, these are small countries on the path of Papua New Guinea, island nations, very different from where I come from. But the people really do enjoy life. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? You know, I mean, some of the communities have life very tough, but there's still a way of working together and enjoying that, and that rubs off on you. So I guess the question about what gets me out of bed in the morning is that I just really enjoy that. I mean, I'm in my early 70s, and here I am working with young entrepreneurs.
What? Are you serious? You don't look it. I never knew that. What?
I'm 74.
Wow. Hats off, my friend.
Isn't that ridiculous? Isn't that ridiculous? I'm working with young entrepreneurs. I must be the oldest young entrepreneur in the world. But what is really cool about all that is that I learn from that all the time, and I think they do. Yeah. And I don't think age. I mean, age. I don't think it's ever comes into it, really. Yeah. You know, because I think so much of this is about your willingness to listen and hear people. You know, and I think. I mean, what I do feel about the Pacific is that there are a lot of outsiders that come in. Some of those come in with a view that their job is to tell people how to live and what to do. And quite rightly, people don't appreciate that. Yeah. What should they, you know? Yeah. But coming in with the view to share and learn from each other, people lap it up. They love it. So that's, I mean, and what a way to earn a living. When I've been self-employed for a long time, I will be a terrible employee. I'll be hopeless. When I don't like the rules at the best of times, I would never be any good as an employee. So being self-employed has been really good. I mean, I work with my partner, so we support each other. I mean, before COVID, of course, we didn't see that much of each other because she'd be here in Vanuatu, I'd be in Solomons. But we're constantly communicating. Since COVID, when I finally got back here, then we're obviously both working from here. Yeah. But that's also really good. You're working with somebody that you know respect and trust. And we work in different ways, but that's cool. And it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never going to be rich, but as long as we make enough money, you know, and we live in a beautiful environment, it's about 30 degrees at the moment.
That's not too bad, right?
Not too bad. Absolutely. It's not too bad. I mean, obviously,
wow.
life has been a little bit tough, and we could talk about that, but no, it's not. No, it isn't too bad at all.
What a beautiful intro. Thank you for taking the time, and it's a nice, cool combination of sharing your personal journey to give people some perspective, but also really the stuff that you've done in terms of the work, amazing work in some of the developing countries and the Pacific Island nations specifically. You know, those are areas that are super unique. And a couple of observations, Chris, that I really want to bring out, because I think it's super important that you know, we unpack some of the things that you've said. And I think as a start, it is about your attitude and about how you approach stuff. And you are right, the Pacific Island nations, they have a very special charm, and we've both been charmed by it, obviously. But it is about the people and their stories. And one other absolutely important, crucial conversation topic you are bringing out, it's about appreciating different cultures, diversity, different opinions, and listening and appreciating that. And that is also one of the crucial COVID conversation topics that I'm talking to a lot more people about in the next few weeks. And I'm glad you're kind of helping with a wonderful intro, because it is so important for us. And, you know, I see that I've done a lot of work in developing Africa, you know, some of the other developing regions across the world, where it is so common for people coming in. And it's great that you bring your ideas, because together, we are all in this together. Together we can brainstorm around what's the best way forward. But to come in, and you and I both share the same passion or distaste for this, but people coming in and thinking that they have the answers, but not spending the time to listen and hearing the stories of the people who live and breathe the culture, the environment every single day. There is value in that. There is a need to pause and listen and to understand. And this is why I think one of the good things that came out from COVID and last year, where some of these topics really were shoved, as it should have been, to the forefront for the first time in many, many years. You know, things like what we've seen in America, this whole global movement towards understanding and perhaps appreciating diversity and different opinions even better. So yeah, thank you for that, because I think it's really important that we talk about it, you know. So
it is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And unless you've lived and breathed it, and you've grown and you have an appreciation for this, and you understand why it is so important to listen, the work that we are doing right now, whether we just touch one or two people, whether we just share the stories and one or two people think, oh, okay, maybe I need to think about this a bit more. The work that we're doing right now is actually really important, because the more we share, the more we talk about this, the more understanding we can cultivate and foster with people, within people. And that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, sorry, go on.
No, go, please. There's a slight delay, so please go.
I think one of the things I've learned as well over the years is that we have to find safe places to have tough conversations. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that in a lot of the culture in Vanuatu and in the Solomons, I guess the two I know best, there's some real challenges there. Yeah. Growing up as a young woman in these cultures must be really tough. And I guess one of the difficulties is, where do people talk about these things?
Sure.
They may hear thoughts from the pulpit or from the politicians, but where are the real conversations taking place? And I think outsiders have a role here, not to go in and tell people how they should behave, which unfortunately a lot of my fellow expats will have done over the years, but actually use the role of being an outsider to ask questions which you wouldn't ask if you've been brought up within the culture.
Wow. True.
And as long as you aren't, I think you ask them in a empathetic way. You know, if you ask them in an authoritarian way, then you're not going to get the answer. I know, for example, that the level of domestic violence in the Solomons is not acceptable.
Yep. Exactly.
And I would never pretend that it was, you know, and if I get asked about it, I will make a comment. But there's ways of doing that, aren't there? You know, you can sound very superior and as if you know better, but the levels aren't that much better in the West.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can encourage people, and I think that what I like particularly about a lot of the young entrepreneurs is that they are prepared to have these conversations.
And that is brilliant. That's a beautiful shift, isn't it? Because it is important for these, for the indigenous people of different cultures to start having these really tough conversations in a safe place. And I think that's beautifully said. I mean, you've just really said it in a way that I want to remember, and I want to use that because it is exactly what it is. You know, we may touch on controversial topics, but it is said in a place where it is safe and people will allow that, I wouldn't say freedom of speech, but that flow of conversation to happen, that there is no judgment and there's no trauma attached to that discussion, you know?
Absolutely. And that is tough.
Yeah.
But to do that, people have got to be very confident. And I guess a lot of what I've learned over the years is that if we do nothing else, we've got to help people grow their confidence. You know, which isn't just about growing their knowledge. You know, it's about what's going on inside them.
Exactly.
And are they
it's the inner journey
enough? Yeah, absolutely. Now, people are going to express themselves in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
And again, I do find sometimes that outsiders would have a judgmental approach to this. And and I've heard people say, well, lots of South Pacific Island people are very shy. Well, so what? I mean, they use the word as if it's a criticism.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the UK are very brash, and not a very good idea either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I do think, I mean, I think, over this last year particularly, I think there's been a challenge to people's confidence levels. Particularly in countries like the Solomons and Vanuatu, where COVID is almost unheard of, and there's been one case only here. In the Solomons, not that many. Yet the whole country totally affected by it.
Exactly. Critically affected by it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, in tourism in Vanuatu, 40% of the GDP gone. Affected by something which most people will never see here, because hopefully,
yeah, exactly.
And that is enough to rock anybody's confidence level, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. How do you come back from that? Hey.
Well, I think what it really pushes is what sort of leadership have we got. I mean, globally, I think what 2020 has shown is that the male leaders of the world have been bloody awful. I mean, the female leaders.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that and not me.
Yes. Well, you know, you look. Yes, we won't mention any names, but I'm sure we can all think of exactly who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think that, you know, that combative style of leadership, it's not what people need, and it hasn't worked.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And I think what a lot of the younger people are showing is more collaboration, you know, a style of working together. They don't know all the answers either, but at least they're prepared to have a go, you know.
Yeah, by discussion and consulting and having that different type of more situational leadership and listening. Absolutely. You know, absolutely.
And trying out ideas. And if we can be there as adults helping that, I think that's a real privilege, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not about telling people what to think, it's about helping to guide that thinking, really. You know?
So beautifully said. Absolutely. And that's what makes you special in the way that you approach people, Chris, and also why you have such admiration and a huge impact in the youth and the Pacific nations, because you have that attitude and you think refreshingly different to so many other people in developing countries doing work. Yes. So tell me, what did you learn from 2020? If you had to summarize, you've done a lot of stuff with youngsters, with businesses, with NGOs, governments. What did you learn from 2020? What can you share?
Well, the first thing was, it took me 12 weeks to get home from Honiara to Port Vila. So I was in living on my own in a hotel room for 12 weeks. So that's quite interesting. I mean, personally, one of the things I've learned as an older person is technical skills. And I think it's been quite interesting, really, looking at how people have communicated during 2020. Yeah, I think the patterns of communication have changed an awful lot.
Yes.
And I have regular talks now with people, with friends who have been friends for a long, long time, but prior to last year, we may not have talked to each other for 2 or 3 years. Now we're talking regularly, and isn't that interesting? Yeah? And I guess that's partly because, there's obviously, everyone's had to live with a level of fear during the year.
Yeah.
And we've certainly learned how to live with the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really lucky. The 12 weeks didn't bother me, but I could imagine that for some people, 2 weeks in isolation must be a sheer nightmare.
Exactly.
And imagine if you're in a relationship that you don't get on very well and you're stuck in the same room for 2 weeks, or you've got kids that you find get on your nerves. I was really lucky, didn't have any of that stuff. But I think, back to your question, I think the communication has been a good lesson. It's forced me to learn some technical skills, which is good. It's very easy to fall back on being an old person, and not let that happen. So that's been really cool.
I love that.
It was a Clint Eastwood, somebody who said that he just doesn't let the old man in.
Yeah, he can come knocking, but
there, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's your spirit. It's awesome.
And there's been a lot of really good news stories around in terms of people trying. I think the year has been incredibly tough. People have come through all sorts of challenges. I think that if we haven't learned about leadership, then we're never going to learn. I think I was serious, but I think we have seen examples of good leadership and incredibly poor leadership. And if we don't learn from that, if we allow the ego to get in the way, unfortunately, my gender is very good at that, I think, and it just shuts the ears and doesn't listen.
Yeah.
And people get very egotistical about the whole thing. I can see the other thing I've learned is, doing things like webinars and stuff I hadn't done before last year. I'd always written the articles, which have been, but now building on those, which have been really cool. I think people probably had more time for other people, because we're not spending so much of our lives on airplanes or rushing around, so we find other ways of communicating. And that can't be bad, can it? Really? I do think the fear level is probably high for lots. I'm lucky I don't suffer from that. But it must be very difficult for people who are literally frightened. Hazel and I were separated for the 12 weeks, but we were in touch every day. People who have lost loved ones during that period must be terrible. And hard to come back from in lots of ways. But I think it shows just how resilient we are as a race. The whole world dealt with something that they didn't even know existed really at the beginning of the year, did they? And then all of a sudden it's affecting everybody. And it's
exactly.
in the language. I'm sure there's going to be thousands of books written about the whole experience.
Very true. Very, very true. Chris, what did you
But I
learn
think,
from, sorry, go ahead. Do you mind if I jump in? Sorry, there is a slight
no,
delay for our listeners.
Jump in, jump in.
So tell me, because your perspective is super, super interesting, and I love the fact that you've shared some of the personal journeys as well, because that's what people want to hear as well. They want to know that, I'm not alone. We're all in this together. Okay, somebody else has gone through it. I've gone through it myself, and it makes it okay to start talking about it. Also, the other side, maybe you can just touch on that, Chris, because you've done amazing work during a lockdown here, working with some of the youth in different countries remotely, working with businesses remotely, with the technology that we have now all acquired to work with and love or hate, but we have to work with the technology.
Sure.
So give me some things that you've learned from your consulting side. What are the things that businesses learned or that you've helped them see? For me, always perspective is one of those things. Sometimes when people are so in it, they can't see some options for their business. So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, I'm sure there's been really interesting stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I guess the notion of the idea of conversation has come through, really. Yeah. I mean, what I think used to happen a lot is that people would get into the habit of maybe going off on training courses. I mean, certainly people in the Pacific really love to go off on trips to Fiji or wherever, and they go and do a week course or whatever. Now, there hasn't been any of that. So that's had to be replaced by other things.
Right.
And I think that's been quite interesting, because I think one of the things it's been replaced by is people learning by conversing, talking. Now, I think that's quite difficult for bureaucratic organizations, because it's quite difficult to measure.
Yeah.
But when I think about my consulting, and over the last year or two, I mean, I've done more talking with people than ever before. And my style very much is we'll have an hour's Zoom conversation. I will send an email which summarizes what we've been talking about. That will probably go on for a bit, then we'll have another one, and on it goes.
Yeah.
Now, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because that's quite difficult to document, and I know that doesn't necessarily suit some donors or funders. But the feedback I get from the individuals themselves is that they love it.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is about speed, and I don't believe that it's necessarily about going at the speed of the slow. Sometimes we've got to push people, but sometimes we do have to slow down as well, don't we? Yeah, and allow people to explore things, which is going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, and if anything, COVID brought that out. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we've probably not earned quite as much money. I'm not sure, really. I mean, certainly haven't done any traveling. Physical traveling, but lots and lots of contacts, and I mean, when you think back to the stuff on the Solomons, and the work with the young entrepreneurs, on the whole, it's not been affected. I mean, people get a little bit frustrated sometimes when the internet drops out or something, but we've been chatting away to people in Gizo or in Munda or in Noro or Malaita, and so that's been, I think what that is showing is that there are different ways of doing things. Yeah?
Exactly.
And that people can learn in different ways. There's certainly been no shortage of demand to support people. I mean, obviously there's a lack of money, so people don't have so much money to spend. So I mean, that obviously affects people doing the sort of stuff we do. Yeah, because people haven't got quite as much to spend it on, but I don't know. I mean, I found that I guess I refuse to take the negative view. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of negativity around, and it's very easy to go down that hole, really, isn't it? And so, oh my God, COVID, it's the end for us all. No, stop. It will pass. I mean, in the Pacific, people went through Cyclone Pam. They've gone through Cyclone Harold. in New Zealand, they went through the earthquakes. They will pass. They do pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we have to remind ourselves of that. Yeah.
That's right.
You know, and do we bury our heads while all this is going on, or do we actually take the view that says, well, all we can do is the best we can do? Yeah. Let's get ourselves a little bit organized. I think that's an interesting challenge. I think that the notion of resilience and sustainability has probably come up more in conversation.
Yep, very true.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, you know.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
And not in an academic sense, yeah, but small businesses beginning to try and understand what this means.
Exactly.
It's very easy to use sustainability as a buzzword, isn't it? You know, and as if everyone knows what it means. But I do think that people are really exploring those things.
Yeah.
You know, they're exploring what they can do to ensure that they can keep going as best they can. I mean, you know, when you're in the tourism arena, and I mean, tourism as an industry has been terribly affected.
Yep.
But at the same time, people have been creating new domestic tourism. There is, I mean, we've been traveling to places that we would have got on a plane and gone somewhere else. I mean, I know, you know, in New Zealand, people are traveling more locally than ever before.
Yeah. Exactly. It's interesting, Chris, because I saw an article quite recently in Forbes magazine where, you know, nature, wellness, giving back, those are all trends that we will see, for example, in tourism for traveling moving forward. That is really shaking things up, and people will think completely different about, not just about travel, but, you know, how do I spend my money? Where do I travel? Do I even travel? And what do I do? I want to just comment on a couple of other things that you've said, which is absolutely super important. You know, Chris, you talk about, and maybe this is more for our business audience listening, and people within the realm of consulting and people making a difference and helping others. But it's interesting that you say that, because I think you and I both have had many interesting discussions about the value of those coaching, mentoring relationships, the value of those discussions. And after all, this is Crucial COVID Conversations. So I understand why this is important, because this is very often where people learn, where people identify, where people find perspective, where people find motivation and inspiration and positivity by having these discussions. You and I both know it is absolutely critical. And you know what? The COVID crisis brought it to to the forefront in a way that we could never even have imagined, because it's not just about the health crisis or the economic crisis or all the other crises. It's about the human health and well-being crisis as well. Absolutely. And this is actually probably even more important. You know, people always say, if you're not healthy or you're not doing well mentally, and you know, the physical side of things will not flow. We know if you're a business owner, or if you're somebody that's helping people, trying to make a difference, if you're not good, you can't be good for others. If you're not good, you can't really, I mean, how can you even have a discussion about the financial outcomes and resilience and business continuity if you yourself are struggling? You have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to talk, nobody to talk to. You are in depression, or you have anxiety, or you can't do well. How can you even think about doing the other things? Then you and I agree on this, and I think it's so important. And I want to put this out there to some of our friends and my friends within HR. I know that this is critical. You know, I'm dealing with a project right now where HR metrics is critically important, but these things there is no metrics for us to measure these conversations and the value of that mentoring and I guess, coaching projects, as opposed to formal training and development. Those are easy to measure because you have costing and you could directly link it to a KPI. This is more difficult. So I want to challenge our people in our industry. Let's start talking. Let's bring this to the forefront. Let's start developing metrics that will help us to be able to measure this, because this is what's going to be important this year moving forward. Things are changing. You know, the landscape is changing, and this type of thing is going to become critically important for leadership development, for people's mental health and well-being, right?
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the groups of people that have to be challenged on this are the donors and the supporters of a lot of this work.
Yep.
And yes, things like cash flows or marketing plans are important, but as you say, they're not about the hearts and minds. You know, and I think one of the things I've done a lot of thinking about as well over this last year or so is the whole notion of coaching. I mean, it's worried me over the last few years that the words coaching and mentoring get used very freely. And, you know, you get everyone saying, oh, I'm doing some coaching, as if it's dead easy. But actually, listening to somebody fully is really tough. You know, and it's hard work. You know, people have got their mobile phones buzzing in their pocket and they've got things going on. It's a very, very tough thing to do. And it has been a good challenge to reinvent that notion. And we're just about to start here in Port Vila to develop a coaching team. And I'm really excited about putting together some real coaching skill and attitude training for people, because it's a real talent. And I think you're right, it is really difficult to measure. So a donor gives you money to do somebody's books, it's easy to measure because you can see the outcome. They get onto zero, easy, spend the money. You spend 6 months coaching somebody, how on earth do you measure that?
That's right. Because very often that effect you only start seeing that when somebody starts facing some of those challenges that you were coaching on. And that could very likely be 6 months or a year in the future. But once that happens, they have the ability to react to that situation. And how do you measure that? It's harder, you know, but this is the type of stuff and the conversations that we need to have to get people aware of it, right?
We do need to have it. Yeah, we do. And I know I tend sometimes to get on the wrong side of a few organizations trying to have these things, but they do need to take place. They do.
For sure.
And we need to try and understand, you know, how we use these skills and approaches in a really positive way. And do we need to measure everything? I don't know if we do, really. You know,
now there's an interesting thought. Tell me.
Do we need to measure the relationship between a father and his son? As long as that relationship is working, right? You know, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that you know, with business coaching, people will give me a form to fill in at the end or something. But I'm thinking, well, actually, the value of this is that we're just doing it. We're sitting there talking. It's making the eye contact. It's creating a level of empathy, which you actually can't, you know, you can't measure. But then the other side of that, as donors will keep telling me, well, it's public money and it's got to be accountable.
It's a fine balance, Chris, and I think it's so important because again, you and I agree 100% on this. I mean, it needs to happen, and it's harder to measure, but it has to happen. And I think maybe if I could just add something else in there as well, you know, it is you're bringing up such a great question, and this is the time for us to pause and rethink, how do we move forward? The question about, do we really need to measure this in the same way we measure other outcomes? It's a fantastic question. And while we are in this process of realigning, readjusting, pausing and thinking how best to move forward, maybe this is the time to shake up these things a bit better and understand, well, look, not everything can be measured in the same way. And I love what you've brought up, because I think it's something that we need to think about and unpack even further. And it's among those many other crucial COVID conversation topics that's coming up because of what happened with us and what happened to humanity and us as a species, last year, right? Chris, I'm curious, maybe not curious, but I want to hear some more thoughts from your side on this. And, you know, your positivity, how you've diversified yourself, and you've personally been in this COVID situation where there's been lots of challenges, business has been affected. I mean, personally, your partner and you were separated. So you're a classic example of somebody that has experienced COVID, perhaps not the medical health and well-being side specifically, because we are in countries in the Pacific that crisis is not yet, hopefully never will be, to the forefront, but all the other things you've experienced, right? And you've worked with clients and people that have had those experiences as well. You've demonstrated such remarkable resilience and positivity, and you're so inspirational. I mean, I love reading your latest article series, Being the Best We Can Be. And, I want to know, Chris, how did it start? And, share some of those absolutely beautiful concepts with us, because you are leading by example. You are making a difference by actually putting your money where your mouth is. And that's so important today. And you're helping people through this crisis. So tell me a bit more. How did it start? And, what topics are you covering?
Well, I guess for me is what's the choice? I mean, the choice is to be miserable. No, and I don't want to put that down, because I know some people have really tough lives. Yeah. And I don't want it to sound flippant or anything. Yeah. But I think that the whole notion of being the best you can be, for me, it's nothing to do with status or money. It is about making the best you possibly can of the situation you're in. You may not have personally put yourself there, but you can at least try and shape how you're managing at the time. It's really difficult, I think, to not sound just too simplistic about the whole thing. But when I look at a lot of the young people around the Pacific, I think that's exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They're wanting to be they know that things aren't as right as they want them to be.
Yeah.
They know that there are a lot of political challenges. And I mean, I just take the view that says, well, okay, if the glass is half full or half empty, as far as my world is concerned, it's going to be half full. I've just never thought anything differently, really.
Yeah.
Now, that just goes back over the years. I mean, I left school when I was really young, don't have a university education. But what I have had is the benefit of being in lots of really sort of quite sharp communities, sharp in terms of challenging. So places like Belfast in Northern Ireland and Liverpool in the north of England, some of the big challenging cities. But in all those places, there's a level of humanity. Yeah. I mean, they're not easy places to live in. They're quite tough, as I'm sure there are plenty of places in South Africa like that. But they're full of people.
Yeah.
And on the whole, I think people want to try and make the best. And this last lot of articles that I've been doing around Be the Best You Can Be is really just about trying to say to people, look, we can't do anything else really. Yeah, all we can do is do our best.
Yeah.
And for me, that means that I can't blame others. If I spend my life blaming my parents or the politicians or the weather or anybody else, then I'm going to get nowhere. I'm sure all those things are contributory factors.
Yes.
But what's the point of blaming? I mean, we're in the position we're in. We've got to find a way through it.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the quotes of Lord of the Rings as well. Lord of the Rings is my favorite movies, my favorite books. And I love your quotes as well. You have such inspirational quotes. And that's really it. I mean, you got to do the best you can with the information that you have been given at that moment. You just got to be the best you can.
It is about mindset. It is about mindset. And I'm sure we could argue for a long time about where that comes from. But I'm sure a lot of it is about people around you. Yeah. When you look at the Pacific, I mean, people come through major weather events on a very regular basis, and they come through it, most of them.
Yeah, exactly. Resilience,
And what I do think is it's a little bit of an aside, I guess, but what was the cyclone last year? Cyclone Harold. Because of COVID, so because the borders were closed, they weren't able to bring in all these saviors from outside, and people had to do it themselves. Yeah. And lo and behold, they managed to. Yeah. They've got a lot of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important, Yeah, the experience part
It
as
is
well.
important, and it's important to have the confidence in your own collective experience.
Yeah.
You know? But also, I think it's important to have the confidence that we can change. Yeah, cultures change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are aspects of all cultures, aren't they, which aren't
Mm-hmm.
particularly good, which do need changing.
Exactly.
But these
Exactly.
things do happen over time. You
Yeah.
know, and that's what be the best you could be. Really, for me, is all about. Yeah. It is about making that decision. Do you see the world as half full or half empty? If you see it as half empty, well, that doesn't matter. We're going to blame people,
Yeah.
and you're probably going to be standing still.
Yeah.
You know, if you
Exactly.
see it as half full, I mean, I talk to people about saying, I think one of the quotes is something about, what's the quote about? If you can't fly, run, and if you can't run,
Yeah.
walk, and if you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward.
Keep on moving. Yeah.
Absolutely. Even if it's tiny, tiny steps.
Yeah.
It still takes the effort to move forward, and I think that's the message I try and give to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's so
when the shit
important.
hits the fan and things are really tough, and they haven't got any money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important not to be glib about that, because that, it's painful to people. But then it's about using your human strength. Is that okay? We've got to make a step forward here. What's it going to be? How are we going to do that? So I see more collaboration going on now than ever before. People, I mean, young entrepreneurs in the Solomons, talking to them here, talking to them in Tonga. That's cool. Good stuff. Yeah. And of course, technology helps them do that. And the more people do that, I mean, the world's a small place, eh?
Yeah, that's very true. I saw something interesting on LinkedIn the other day where somebody was talking about, and it's so true. I mean, you and I live and breathe it, we know it, and it's important that we talk about it, but it's that concept of, attitude and how you look at things, and your happiness, how your happiness really depends on, I mean, sure, there is genetics, and we know that that's a big part of it. But there is also circumstances, which you've talked about, blaming people around you, things like that. But then there is this huge chunk, almost half of what determines how happy you are is your internal state of mind. And that is exactly what you are talking about. How do you approach things? Is the glass half full, half empty? Or is it half full and you're deciding on how you're gonna swim and what boat you're gonna buy to put in there? It's about just your attitude and how you look at things in terms of that, which is so important,
It is, and I think we can help each other and support each other. I mean, in this current series of articles I'm doing, I'm basing it on Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People, and habit number 1 is about being proactive. And I think for me, that's the key. Yeah. Am I a victim, or can I make a difference in my world?
Absolutely.
Now, that difference might be very small, but it's very different to being a victim.
Absolutely.
And I guess most entrepreneurs have chosen the proactive route.
Yep.
They're
Exactly.
saying, no, we've got to do something. And you don't have. And I think the other thing is, you don't have to actually know the answer. You might know the journey you're on, but you have no idea what lies ahead of you. And I mean, COVID's like that for the world, isn't it? I mean, no one knows. Yeah, you got all these pundits on all the time, and they talk about the future as if they know, but no one has a clue. No, but what do we do?
That's also okay. I think you bring up such a good point, Chris, because everybody always expects to know the answer or to have the answer. It is okay not to have the answer. It's okay not to be okay right now. It's okay to trust the process and the journey, but it's about how you go about, being proactive, being positive. And I'm talking about all the pieces as well that I did in the Weathering the COVID-19 Storm, which is one of those webinars we did where it's really important to remember what are the tools that you have, how just your shifting your attitude and your mentality really just helps you to be able to weather this COVID-19 storm. Chris, where do we find your articles? Is it out there? Where can other people share with me? How can other people get a hold of this amazing stuff that you are doing?
Well, I ought to better answer that by saying that we've got a really good website, and I'm doing all the things that you should be doing on social media. Hopefully, I will one day. At the moment, they're published in Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomons, and Tonga.
Excellent.
Once a week, but people can contact me.
Perfect.
And I am meeting somebody next week who is going to start to teach me how to get all this stuff more widely available.
Yes, because we all want to hear it. You are a case in point to actually wanting to learn and wanting to develop skills to be able to become more resilient and diversify.
This is true, and hopefully make some money from it.
Exactly.
The thing about the articles have always been, I've been doing them for about 5 or 6 years, and they're not great pieces of writing, but what I set out to do was just write a few thoughts each week, and it's really cool. I get lots of emails, I get people phone me up, and people tell me their stories. So isn't that nice? Yeah? It's nice to be part of that.
Absolutely, it's getting the conversations going. There you go. So
it is getting the conversation going.
Exactly. So tell me, what tips do you have for us for 2021? I mean, what are the things, what messages do you have for us? What do we need to keep in mind? Because, it is getting better slowly, but it is not there yet. We may see an entire 12 months still of this going on. So what messages do you have for people, Chris? What can you share with us that's going to help us deal with 2021?
No pressure then, yeah. I think it's really important to trust our own judgments, is to have the buzzword will be vision, have a view in mind of where we're heading, which is not COVID related. It's because COVID's here doesn't mean that the world has totally changed. And I think it's really important that we're able to visualize where we're going. We may not know how we're going to get there, but I think that visualization is a very powerful motivator. Yeah, and we can share that with other people. And that's what I try and help people do with a lot of the coaching, is to visualize where you're heading, and then start to be realistic about, okay, where are we starting at? What are we starting from? I've always been a great believer in very simple, old-fashioned tools, and one of the most old-fashioned is the good old SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. That's been around for years and years and years, isn't it? But most people have no idea how to use it. I say to people, look, the opportunities are the key. What are the opportunities in your world right now? And I would say that they do exist. We've got to find them sometimes. Sometimes they might feel a little bit hard. But how am I going to harness my strengths? And what am I going to do about the weaknesses that are going to stop me getting there? Now, they're personal decisions. Yeah, they're things I can decide to do or not. Now, so for me, it's about having a clear vision, visualizing what we want to achieve in our lives, not allowing that to be done through the eyes of COVID or anything else really, but about what do we want to achieve, whether it's for us as individuals or our businesses or our families or our neighborhoods or our nation. Yeah, we can all do it. And then it's small steps, never standing still. And the final thing on that, and I'm just thinking, the final habit in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, he calls it Sharpen the Saw. Sharpen the Saw is about keeping ourselves sharp. And that's so important, isn't it? Yeah. So we, working on our own confidence levels, looking after our health, looking after our emotional and mental health, looking after our relationships.
Exactly.
But not indulging in too much excesses of anything, but keeping going, keeping sharp, so we can get there.
Yeah, I love
And we can
that,
all do.
Chris. Yeah, exactly. I love that because you are so right. It's about, and I keep on saying this is one of my favorite things to say. Not only are we all in this together, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. And this is why you can never separate any success without your own mental health and well-being being solid and being looked after. Whether you go for a run every day, or whether you meditate, or whether you find spiritual enlightenment, or whether you go to, it doesn't matter where you find it, as long
No,
as
it
you
doesn't.
find what makes you able to fill your cup. And that is so important. And if anything, crucial COVID conversations and the whole COVID-19 crisis has brought this to the forefront for me, where mental health and well-being, every single person in this world right now is affected. Perhaps some more than others, but we can't say that none of us are experiencing that, whether it was an anxiety about being in isolation, or whether it is dealing with the harsh reality of
No one's
losing a
an expert
loved
in
one.
that.
Absolutely.
No.
What I love about what you just said,
what
go ahead. Go ahead.
What I do say as well is I think it's really important that we surround ourselves by positive people if we can. I think
So powerful.
very, if we're subject to negativity all the time from loved ones or wherever, really hard to withstand that.
Oh, cannot agree more. Absolutely, 100%. And what I loved about what you said earlier, I just want to make a point of bringing that up, because I think as we close, I want to make sure that we leave with something that I think is so powerful. Chris, you've mentioned everything is about COVID, and even these conversations is about it. You know, how do you learn from 2020? What do you do in 2021? But what I loved about what you brought out earlier is the whole world is not, COVID will move past. But when you visualize, when you plan, when you strategize, do it without COVID. You may have a COVID plan, but I love that, because you are right. I mean, our lives are not COVID. This will pass. And when we start energizing, what does the world look like without that? I love that. I haven't thought of it like that. I want to remember that.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously invaded all our thinking for the last year or so.
Yes.
And doesn't matter what you put on the television or radio or online, you get it. And that's going to continue for a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it isn't. Yeah. That's just the last year or two. For me, there was 72 years before that. And I think we've all got a whole pile of other stuff. And I just think the whole visualizing is a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that's allowing ourselves to dream. And I remember I use a film where they describe a goal as a dream with a date, and I think it's great. It's a great.
Wow.
It's a great image, isn't it? Yeah.
Fantastic.
Is you have a dream and you put a date on it and say, right, that's what I'm going for.
That's a goal. Oh, I love it. Yeah, that is powerful. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Well, it keeps me going.
Krista, tell me before we close off, and I am so energized and always inspired, and you always put me in this amazing positive mood when we talk, and I don't want it to end, but we have to, because we've been, we need to give people some time as well to go and do other things. So tell me, how do people find you? Share with us your website, and again, I will share all of that once we premiere and we launch. We'll make sure that all of those links are within the body of the launch. But tell me where people find you, and how can we connect with you and share stories and hear your story.
Okay, so Breadfruit Consulting, all one word, .com. LinkedIn. You want me to give a phone number?
Sure, yeah, if you feel comfortable, whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So this is Vanuatu, so it's +678 55 00 556.
55 00 556. Easy to remember.
That's easy one. And I'm Chris at Breadfruit Consulting. And Breadfruit, we rebranded about 4 years ago and wanted a Pacific name.
Love it.
And no one, hardly anybody in the South Pacific use the term breadfruit. Yet it's symbolic of stability. It's a local fruit that is still there after a cyclone. So it's this symbolic of strength and stability. So that's where it came from.
You know, I never actually asked you the story. I always thought the name was very cool. So I absolutely love it. And what a fantastic way to end our session with a local flair of the South Pacific and giving us all the ability to have that strength and be there after a cyclone and be there after
Absolutely.
COVID and bring the positivity forward. Chris, I really want to thank you. You are an amazing individual. I mean, you are positive, inspiring, and you are making a difference. You are practicing what you are preaching and you are leading by example. Thank you so much for joining my crucial COVID conversations today.
You're very welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you. Keep well. Hey, we'll be in touch.
More conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.